Thank you very much.
Okay, so hi everybody. So I start just saying a few words. So I've been knowing Fernando for several years already, since we have both been active and living in Paris and gravitating like around IRCAM and so on. So I'm well acquainted with his music, and in the past months we have also been sharing thoughts about his research project. The topic of the project is compositional strategies based on granular paradigm. And yeah, this topic speaks to me on many levels. I've been working with lot with the idea of corpus-based composition in audio and in symbolic domain by means of concatenation and interpolation of small and medium-sized blocks. However, this has never become more than the application of a technique, and it never questioned the classical top-to-bottom approach to composition. The case of Fernando is quite different. He's very influenced by the approach of Orazio Vagione, and he proposed a bottom-to-top approach where techniques that were normally operating in the signal are transferred on the symbol level, and where the meso and macro levels manifests as emergence of a micro level. So I will let Fernando guide you through the story of his personal application of the granular paradigm, and I will only raise a few points that seem important to me, and that I think that may be fruitful to the future development of his research. So point number one, the buffer. The buffer as objet trouvé. Granular synthesis requires a minimum of one buffer. However, the relevance of this buffer can be easily obliterated by multiplying the number of buffers, by reducing the size of a grain, or simply by using some more anonymous material. Like, for example, the Gabor-like grains that Xenakis use in Analogique B. So this is like a granular synthesis becomes sort of like additive synthesis is subsumed into like a larger category. So granular synthesis like subsume additive synthesis in this case. In the music of Fernando that I know, on the contrary, actually, buffers are well-constructed entities. In some cases, even historical artifacts. I'm thinking, like, for example, in a piece of him, like there is like a very clear quotation of the Adagietto of the 7th Beethoven Symphony. And those historical artifacts or well-constructed buffers gets discovered or concealed as the granulation as the piece actually unfolds. So that's the first point. Second point, which is like a little bit more conceptual, and it's more related to Vagione, which is a source of inspiration for Fernando. And it's the idea of the network operating actually with the networks of interrelated objects. And those are really actually actual words from Vagione. And with this technique, Vagione actually draws inspiration from a paradigm coming from information technology, namely from object-oriented programming. Main principles of object-oriented programming are encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. Polymorphism allows different types of objects to share behaviors or pass through the same interface. So the subsumption of audio techniques under a bigger framework, so the use of granular paradigm on medias other than sound, which is a big point actually for Fernando in his latest pieces. That's a growing preoccupation in Fernando's work. This could also maybe draw inspiration from this concept, actually coming from OOP, from object-oriented programming, the concept of polymorphism. So basically, the idea that I can have like several, objects which are very different. I mean, I'm talking from from the point of view of a Lisper, which is not really an object-oriented language, but so that's my limitation. But there is like it's possible to do object-oriented programming. So, for example, you can have like several objects like sharing a sort of same ancestor, same parent, and just use like the same sort of processing actually for like function method actually for all objects that have objects that can really be different. In the same way, like we can actually imagine to use the same sort of technique for different medias. So that's the second point. Third and last point, it's the role of the computer, actually, because I mean we are talking every time about some variation, actually, some sort of computer-aided composition. Bajone, always him, in his writing insists on the notion of interaction. And he's quoting for this Terry Winograd: "The machine has to be thought as a mechanism with whom we interact and not as a mathematical abstraction. This notion is capital to understand the continental, so yeah, allow me this word, approach to the use of computer as a composition helper, which has been the basis actually for the development of software like Patchwork, Open Music. Fernando's approach to algorithms is like uninhibited and undogmatic, and his choice of glass box systems where everything is accessible to the user over black boxes are part actually of this like continental sort of tradition, which is like 40 years long. The tradition of computer-aided composition as opposed to the one of algorithmic composition, a tradition which is aimed to create compositional strategies that are conceived as a continuous feedback between the composer and the machine. So that was the third and last point. So now I would actually let Fernando speak. And
okay, great. Thank you, Mauro, for your introduction, which is very accurate. So I will try to give a general context to his presentation because this is kind of a local topic on a wider research plan. So I will try to address this wider. So maybe more than actually subject, this is the first theoretical frame for the research on which I am taking an ontology of Orazio Bajoni, which is composable space. As you can see in the screen, we can talk about this ontology as, or define it as a playground of object interactions and operations that are constructed on various superimposed planes. So, but the thing that is important is this, that objects are linked by operations and that the whole is forming an operational set. So you can see here a graphic which is took from a paper from Alain Bonardi and Joe Sivilitsky, which is which explain it maybe even better. The thing that I will point out that interests me and that defines me a lot is his idea of sound object, which is not just a sonic unit, but more an active entity. So that could be that we can think this object that could be a function like an algorithm, a parameter list like scores, or a succession of actions to be carried out. scripts, or also sounds, products as well as sources, on which, on the case of this idea of a buffer as an object is very important to me. But this starting point, I'm trying to think it is maybe interesting to extend it to different mediums within an hybrid work. So we could consider object networks also in a wider manner and include active entities which aren't sound-based, even if we can apply similar operations to them as the sound-based objects. This idea of object as an active entity allows us to have maybe similar objects that could react very differently regarding our, well, if it's in computational manner as instantiation, or if it's in writing, the process that we can apply to them. So the notion of extended composable spaces address mainly this coexistence of different temporal regimes, different mediums, and practices in hybrid works. So my this relation with granular paradigm is already 10 years old on my practice. But this increasing hybridization of my artwork is a little bit younger, you can see it. So I see this concept as a potential startup model to approach multidisciplinary interaction and hybrid artwork. As more than a kick-off start, and I am trying, as Mauro told very, very well, to imagine not only in my hybrid works, but also in works in collaboration with other artists of diverse disciplines, or also scientists or technicians, etc. And my idea is to see if we can imagine a system more than a transparent and accessible than the figure of black box, which is borrowed from the first cybernetics from Norbert Wiener, which is made up of inputs and outputs that is and constituting a linear work system. And so this idea of an open system with multiple inputs, I think it will be more profitable to collaborative and hybrid artworks. So I will really fast explaining my first research questions, which are always being tested and proved in practice and in research. So which kinds of methodological approaches might be adequate for creating new knowledge about this heterogeneous composable space of hybrid works? The second one is how my research project can approach the various modes of interaction or overlapping in artworks that convene several mediums, practice, and time regimes. And how to address also the problem of different time regimes of practices when you are overlapping more dynamic or sequenced linked to sound-based works, and at the same time with more static time regime as in installations or visual art. So, and the last, they will be reduced, I hope, is how to approach specific ways of making decisions in a transmedia creative context involving several actors. So, I have in my research a kind of a bottom-to-top strategy also. So my idea is to begin with simple observations, to start from a specific topic situated in the context of sound-based artistic practice. Observe how I apply techniques and strategies from compositional practice in other mediums, and inversely how techniques from or based on other practice are applied in my own musical works. To look at their specific ways of interacting or juxtaposing or feedbacking, and to observe how different mediums, practice, and temporality coexist. So why to focus for this first seminar in granular paradigm? Well, mainly because it's a paradigm that I'm using and that includes a lot of different techniques and compositional strategies based on that. And so I thought that to me will be the easiest or more logical way to start seeing and observing how I apply different compositional strategies to sound-based artwork and hybrid artwork. So this conception of time is already conscient. So that is the answer to this question. So after this brief context that I'm giving, we will start with this seminar. And so we are talking about granular paradigms, so we must to at least mention granular synthesis, because granular paradigm, of course, is wider. There is granular synthesis, there is granulation of sound, symbolic granulation, etc., etc. So I will just address the main points. No, I will. The idea is not to explain to the audience in a very deep way how it works, but just to point out the things that are influencing me. In the history of granular synthesis, the first that mentioned this possibility was Norbert Wiener, and is the most important thing that is derivated from quantum physics. So then the physicist Dennis Gabor, which was a specialist in theory of communication also, and created the hologram, he theorized it in 47 with his article Acoustical Quanta and the Theory of Hearing. The important thing that he addressed the terminology of sonic quanta. So it is addressing microscopic level of sign. And after that, there is, to me, but there is more than that, but that in the history, 4 very important persons. The first one, of course, is Yanis Xenakis, who talked about already in the 60s or maybe before, in articles that which afterwards will make part of his formalized music book. So Xenakis both discuss and use these atomic levels on quanta, often an enveloped simple waveform like sine wave, or simply a bell-shaped sound impulse called a wavelet, to create statistically shaped density clouds. So there is this duality in the beginning between wavelet and grain. But the thing to really point out is this conception of microtime. So maybe this we will just go into that. Granular synthesis as a method. Maybe the simplest explanation is that it's a method by which sounds are broken into little corpuscles, which we call grains, which are redistributed and reorganized to form other sounds. This concept, I mean, it's also a form of amplitude modulation, because for avoiding clicks, the first thing to apply to every wavelet or grain is an amplitude envelope. But you must to imagine this multiplied by a lot. Okay, so there is a very graphic quotation of Yannis Xenakis on this article, who will be part of Formalized Music, but there was first published in the Grabe Center in a Deutsche review, in a German review. So hecatombs of poor sounds are necessary for the creation of a complex sound. This one should be imagined as to be display of fireworks sparkling in all colors, each luminous point of which appearing and disappearing instantaneously on the background of the black sky. But there will be so many luminous spots that firework, and they will organize in a such way that their rapid and swarming succession creates forms, slowly uncoiling volutes, or in the contrary, short explosions inflaming the whole sky. A sufficient number of instantaneously appearing and disappearing spots will form a luminous line. It's very talking, this quotation. He also addressed, and also Bagione and Barry Truax and Curtis Rhodes, this idea that is more a starting point for a given musical work than a scientific fact, this theory. So it's more an intuitive representation than of a scientific consistence. And it's consequently only an hypothesis rather than establishes scientific fact. But it's a first approach to a technique which has beneath a conception of musical time. Both Xenakis and then Bagione are maybe sometimes using different words, so paradigm or approach. Actually, to be exact, Xenakis has brought only 2 pieces, if I remember well, with proper granular synthesis. One is the analogic B that Mauro evokes, and analogic A, which is instrumental. Analogic B is a tape piece, which is made entirely with tape. So Xenakis had to cut with scissors really minimal parts of this tape to, after that, reorganize it with statistical procedures. So you must imagine the amount of time that he needs to do that. In analogic A, it's more an instrumental on which are, if I recall, it's 9 strings that are doing pizzicati, very short, and generating clouds. So I will also try to evoke the most common attributes that you can find in, I mean, there is a lot of granular synthesis procedures or interfaces on which are prepared, and it can change from one to another, and it depends also in ourselves. But I will address those that I think that are most important, because they will talk to myself as a composer and inspire my way of composing. So the rate and the direction of the grain, so how it will read the little chunk of audio signal that is playing, so you can choose it to do it forward and backwards. And the transversal rate is the line time, just to see it like that. And the 3 maybe the more important is the grain size, the duration, and the length. So it's the length of the grain envelope And which, of course, is usually in milliseconds. It could be in seconds, but the time units to measure all that is in milliseconds. So we are in the micro time level of signal. And then another very important is the grain rate. So how many grains you will have per second. So that will define the whole emerging color of the reconstituted sound. And then you have, well, you can imagine a lot, but I will just address those that inspired to me for symbolic granulation and even to manipulate for micromontage even. So transposition or harmonization, I think that I must not to explain that, and the stereo location. So there is a Indiana University professor that has made this very also this graphic, which is very clear. So you can see here the grain envelope, which is also the grain size, and the timeline, so the traversal rate and direction. So that was the this brief introduction. And right now we can start the discussion. If you do not hesitate to make questions or observation if you need it, please, Mauro. The interesting, there is a compositional paradigm or method. That is the most important thing to point out. So we are addressing complex sound objects. Osa Xenakis also cited emerging high-order sonorities. So it is complex sound objects which are resulting for the manipulation of microtime parameters. So these microtime parameters are affecting the resultant and emerging texture, which is this sound. And how Mauro was very clear, this is a bottom-to-top strategy. So we are starting on the microtime to go up to the emergent sound. Another thing which is very important to me is this capacity of switching among time scales. So we can have in the same piece microtime operations doing on parallel with meso time and macro time phenomena. But in a poetic term, the thing that for me is the most influential is this idea of reconstitution, of redistribution or reorganization of a sonic source. That was and still have been being very inspiring to me. And as also Mauro pointed out, the very important thing is that we are taking a model which is based in microtime. I am taking this model from some pieces and applying it. Of course, it's inspired. There is no linear way of interpreting that. That is on which the composer has to create his own word, his own techniques. But the most important thing is this category transfer from audio signal to symbol. And when I'm saying symbol is the level of the note. So you are going to the subsymbolic, so beneath the note, so beneath the hearable, perceptible level, to the symbolic, which is the time which musicians think. And so as a composer, is also a very important thing to me is this ambiguity or switching between figures, so gestalts, instrumentals, gestalts, or even electronics to resultant textures. And sometimes the overlapping of both levels. So, as you pointed out, the very most important concept is this idea of buffer. To me, is a virtual object. Virtual is not in the sense of internet. Virtual in the sense of that it's an object which is beneath and that we can hear or maybe not hear, but is the source of every resultant sound. Mauro, in one of our discussions, you pointed out that this conception is very influenced on the Max MSP interface. I'm recalling what is that, no?
Yeah, I don't know actually, because I'm probably it's I mean, you need to have a buffer in order to have granular synthesis. So probably it's not just Max MSP, but I have impression that for it's what I said in the very beginning actually. Like for you, the buffer is like the most important thing. It's even more. It's even more important that granulation itself, if I can say, because especially working with means which are other than electronic music, like when you're working with players. Of course, you cannot work into the micro level. You're working already on the note level.
On the mesostructure, yes.
Yeah, on the mesostructure. So basically, what you are doing, it's you are taking actually the metaphor, like granular synthesis as a metaphor, to do some symbolic sort of granulation on a symbolic buffer, which is like it's literally like a piece of a score. Of yours or of someone else, or
or both. The whole idea is exactly that. Is that we have like a first material which is very construct, that could be mainly instrumental, that could be a sonic unit, but also that could be a list of actions. But I used to talk a lot about an hybrid virtual object with different levels of. So we have the noise part reference, the more hearable sound part reference, and the reference sounds. So quotations or style quotations or found objects, because in a lot of pieces I'm just getting a sound object, but it is like you say, it is an idea on which I'm having a virtual object that I can deploy in time, that I can on which I can do several operations, but the most significant are related with this granular paradigm. So when I pointed out the question of the size of the grain, I can relate it to this concept of window. So you can imagine on a virtual object, normally I divide the object in onset and offset. So I take the minimal time unit that a human being could play if it's instrumental, and I divide this object, and given the part on which I will read of this big object, that is what we can call a window. Okay, that is very important because the size of this window over the time will determine a big process on which this virtual object unfolds. And this idea has very hearable consequences, because regarding if I am stretching this window or if I am enlarging this window, we can have this perception of time is stretching or enlarging. So you can the window is kind of our device that will allow us to travel in time on this virtual object. And there is also others. I am just pointing out very precise parameters. Not all. I mean, in every piece there is things that are being modified, and it's not maybe to me the most important thing that I am thinking. It's already an approach and a technique that I had incorporated over at least the past 10 years. And of course, I'm not the first on doing that. Just in order to quick compare, I mean, the first composer that is coming to my mind is, of course, Bernard Lang. And Bernard Lang was very influenced by the work of the video artist, the Austrian video artist Martin Arnold, which is playing with that we call looping. But this recurrence of just a founded footage allows to think us that he's also having the same or a similar conception of time on which we are traveling from within one object with a device. So as a musician, another core concept to me is cycle. This cycle is defined by time and not by its contents. That is very important because we can have maybe sometimes the same material, but regarding the operations that we are doing on this material, the results could be very different. So, it's as in computer music or audio signal treatment, this idea of instantiation, that we can have a similar object on which we have applying different operations, or different object with same operation, but having different results. So that is this concept of an sonic entity unity, active unity of the object. But my idea is that normally the time is already articulated. So normally my objects are thought in a way on which I'm already projecting how I will deploy this on time. Okay?
Sorry, can you explain a little bit this? Because I think it's an important thing.
Yeah, so as an example, when I have a kind of a buffer, to me could at the same time in parallel have instrumental if it's a piece with instrument, electronic sounds, or just operations. And for example, if it's instrumental, I know that I have a portion of time which is my virtual object, which can be, I don't know, 10 seconds, 5, 20. But already within the object, I'm thinking about a kind of timbral process. So I can pass from noise to sound to reference in a very short time, and then think how to deploy that in time. But I'm subdividing that in different cycles, time cycles, on which it's not a question of marking time as, I don't know, as in Ligeti concert or have polymetric stuff. It could be also result on that. But the idea is that in each of these cycles serves to me to articulate time and to know which kind of operations I will apply to the object. Okay? It is understood. Is it more clear to you right now?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, so it's an idea that the cycle is a time articulation unit, and it's not defined by the metric or by the content or by the accents or whatever. And another thing is, phase, because normally I can have buffers several buffers which are coexisting at the same time, but they have, or a buffer on which we have several voices on it. And I can, of course, play with the phase of these cycles. So changing the length of each cycle, or choosing cycles which are not having the same amount of time. Okay, so which are dephasing. We must think that I'm not addressing the phase as a parameter of audio signal manipulation, but more as a writing technique or an edition technique. And so when I am mixing instrumental or video and other things, they can share cycles length or not, but even in parallel, I doing operations with a logic, even if I am opposing mesostructures based objects with microstructure based objects. And so with electronic treatment of audio signal, but often I relate both in a way. I hope that I will arrive to that. I could cite an example of an instrumental technique that works with phase in a British composer whose name is Bryn Harrison, who is using since before me this idea of phasing. Okay. So let's go to the music. Okay, I lost. Sorry. So this is Neon Pig is a 2017 piece for amplifier ensemble, speakers, transducers, and electronics. I must to. Right now, I will. Okay, so I will show you some. Sorry. Some sketches, some preliminary sketches. Well, this one is not very. So, I have. Sorry. Yes. I have a buffer who is. Actually, I have three buffers in the first. Three instrumentals. There is also electronic. I will address just the instrumental part in this case. I have three parallel buffers that are working on this piece. And so the ensemble is divided in three groups. So that is my instrumental buffer. In this case, is 24 8 notes at this rate. So it's a very short amount of time, which will be display. I don't recall exactly how much time is during this process, but it's at least 8 or 9 or 10 minutes. So I'm doing 10 minutes music from a 10-second object, okay? And of course, in every buffer, I'm trying to relate things between buffers and to, of course, already project a figure which will contains specific colors that will define the emergent textures, okay? But then not also the content, but also the operations that I applied. So if the size of the window, the separation of the symbolic grains, that has an effect, a direct effect on the emerging texture. And there is also a kind of, it's not really linear, but we can imagine that that more the window is, bigger the window, more we are going for to a symbolic, to a mesostructure perception, more to a figure. We can start to hear kind of figure or motifs or gestalts, if you want, that are coming from a first person, which when the window is very little, and regardless of the operation that I'm doing with this chunk of music, but that on which the perception just can hear this emerging texture. So you have this switching going from texture to figure. So that is the first group, that is the second group. So as you can see, there is, of course, relationships between them, and of course there is hidden metrics in a way, okay? So you can have already written accelerandos or retardandos or different metrics. So there is some instruments that are playing long notes, other shorter, etc. And there is a general gestalt of this. So this third group on this piece is the group of the long notes, as you can see. Okay. Well, that is formal stuff, but okay, I will show you just a little bit of the score, really fast. Not really fast, but so in order that you can see. So if you remember my buffer, I have in every voice, which is every voice here is an instrumental, it's an instrument. I have different ways of reading these little chunks of the buffer. So there is, if we can metaphorically evoke granular synthesis, there is different grain rates repartitions, okay? Sorry, I need to take some water. So, at the beginning, we have a texture which is kind of disaggregated, very granular, if kind of. And then, and of course, as I told you, there is cycles that are helping me create a structure, and these cycles are instantiation cycles. Okay, so and the cycles could have different instantiation, and I can filter voices. I mean, I can, once that I have my canvas, then I am very flexible on the way that I will apply it. So that is a starting point on which I'm already imagining a passage in a process that normally is, of course, switching between this emerging texture to the figures, but within the figures, in this case, I'm passing from a noise, scratchy sound to a more defined sound. And in the electronics part, in parallel, I am using from sometimes granular synthesis, and sometimes I'm doing similar and parallel operations. So aggregating or disaggregating, and of course working a lot with the rate so the quantity of grains in a cycle, okay, and its separation. So I having kind of a first statistical approach on which I know more or less the part of silence and the part of sound in every given voice. Okay.
Is this intuitive, or is this?
I'm starting always with a kind of simpler and linear idea, so in order that I can predict a little bit results, and after this kind of modeling or experiment, I am adjusting. So sometimes I have very clear some things, and sometimes during the composition I am taking decisions which are emerging from the activity. Okay, so as you can see, it's not a linear process on which the separation and the size of the window is going linear. So I have, if you can also imagine this metaphor, I have also waves on these parameters. So the rate, the quantity, etc. And also sometimes I could do transposition, harmonization, etc., etc., etc. So I have a kind of different operation that will be more that will define the emerging sounds, and they will be as important as the sound itself. Okay.
Yeah.
So just
May I say something? And I mean, knowing this piece, I also have impression. Maybe it's just my impression, but that you're also interpolating things. Like
yes,
the grain is not like a unity and it's completely cutted and separated from the rest. But every time you arrange to actually to create.
yes,
Like,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, I didn't want to got in the thing of interpolation because it's already another big subject. But yes, it's one of my the techniques that is recurrent in my work. So normally I'm thinking about blocks, objects which are interpolating in time. Then the ways of they are relating is part of the writing. So, and it could even contradict the initial idea of interpolation because sometimes I'm blurring the borders between. So, and that could be, I mean, imagining on one particular day of the composition and the other day it could affect the next, but it was not in the first, in my first canvas of material, or in my first operational set of objects, okay, on which I have my objects and my operations, okay? So I will
just one quick question actually, because
yes.
we were talking before about like a sort of a bottom to top approach where actually the micro levels is like creating by emergence the macro level. But what is exactly actually your way of working? Because like you, for example, for this piece, like you created, you pre-composed like the three different buffers, and then you started actually like by hand, like doing.
No. I have. I mean, I have. I have some path which are. But I try to leave myself. I mean, I create a kind of playground, and I try to leave a little bit of freedom there. So no, sometimes I have path more than algorithms because it's a time path. There, I'm not putting there the operation that I will apply to the buffer. Okay, so I'm just knowing more or less how much time it will occupy on this. On this case, I am just addressing one of the buffers, which is in 3 parts, and each part has different layers. And I'm
so
not.
For example, you're saying like I'm okay for this section. I'm playing like with the second half of the first buffer, and I'm like reading that, so something like that.
Yeah, or maybe I have a kind of even if a linear or not linear, but maybe sometimes it's kind of sine waves on which I am stretching or enlarging the window size or the grain rate or etc. So I know more or less that I'm starting in a point. Sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's in the first part, sometimes it's in the last part. So it allows this idea of virtual object. It allows you to travel on your object, and that the piece at the end is a kind of it's a travel on the object, and that you can make emerge different sound dramaturgies. So the thing that I know is the starting point, more or less the velocity of the size of the window, etc. And right now I'm just addressing the instrumental part. Because there is a lot of relationships when there is electronics, but that is a subject which is enormous. So I choose to address the instrumental size or parts or even microtime. So let's hear a little bit of okay, if he wants to sound. Yeah. That is the beginning of the piece. So the whole poetical idea is to have a big object which is at the same time changing and repeating all the time, and on which the important thing is sometimes the velocity of change also. So how we, and the most important thing is this kind of scale switching, scale switching. In this particular piece, I mean, my poetic starting point was to describe a kind of imaginary animal and parts of this animal and how I will show this part. So every bit buffer is a part of this animal that I'm seeing. It's just a poetical starting up approach. So I will show you another piece which is, more recent. Contracolpo, which is a very recent piece. I don't know how to translate contracolpo. I have Italians here, but maybe, did you know, Alessandro, how to translate? I mean, it's like counterattack. It could be also, or one of the kind of the meanings. Why that? Because normally it's a very basic setup on which I have a stereo setup and layer. What? Okay, great. Okay, super. So in this piece, I have hybrid instruments. Okay. Which is very also often in my music. So there is a saxophone with a speaker on his bell, on which I am sending to this speaker just noise, basically, just white or brown or pink noise. And then in other part, I have two kind of materials. So I have just noise, voice samplers, and recorded feedback. and the second part. But the first part, which is the important, the saxophone is filtering the noise. So it's used more as a filter, this instrument, with a limited name of positions. And the idea is this imitation of the filtering, both, or this feedback, with the condenser microphone on the snare. So regarding the sound that I am playing and the resultant sound, which is very airy stuff, it will be more or less related with the kind of filter that the sax will apply to the noisy sound. Okay, and well, I don't have the sketches, but if I show you quickly the score, so in the second part is you have the mic, and that is the surface on which part of the instrument it will be played, the pressure of the mic, the direction, and this part is. In this part, I have the sound. I have just 5 types of sounds, 3 types of noises, one which is voice, and the other which is recorded feedback, and so the kind of filter. Okay, and so I have also a buffer. I have 2 buffers actually in this piece, and it's also this. In this one is a very. It's for that I choose, because it's a very simple approach. I have just windowing. I'm not using separation of the grains or nothing. So we feel very clearly how the time is stretching in a way, so enlarging. Okay, and I am passing. So here the buffer is also important, not just because of the acoustic contents, but I am, since some time, also including the gesture on the. So it's very important to see, in a way, also the gesture. In this case of the microphone, but I'm in other recent compositions. These buffers are at the same time acoustical and gestual, in a way. And then I will talk on how it could be applied in image or in other kind of mediums. I was this past year at Villa Medicis, and I even had done graphic poems on which I have buffers and ways of reading, but they're not sequenced in time. So it's a kind of method that I can approach to things that are not just not base sound, but they're not even time-based objects. Okay. So, as you can see, well, I will just show you a little bit of the. Okay. It was created during the COVID, so I was not there. I will just show you further points, because if not, it will be even. So right now the buffer is already more deployed. And so on and so on. I think that you got the idea already. So this also particular time conception right now is applied to hybrid instruments and performance, which is also gestual. Okay, right now this one is kind of a conceptual piece, a conceptual series of pieces on which I had. It is more important the process than the result. That was the whole idea. So it's, if you want, it could be Fluxus influenced. So the idea is to have. I had a commission for it was during the pandemic. So for a festival in which they had created a radio in order to do some audio-based works. And they commissioned me that really a couple of weeks before the date. So my idea is to have a starting point, and on each of the studies, starting with the. I actually here is why I'm choosing that. It's very paradigmatic in my work. I have two very contrast materials, okay? And the whole idea of this study is to put aside a portion of a speech or of a discourse and a portion of a reference object. So it's a part of a classical piece, okay? And the whole idea came to me as a joke at the beginning, because the first of one, the name is Barrow Queer, and I am playing an 8-second Corelli's sample for a concerto grosso G minor, I don't recall which one, and an 8-second sampler of a Judith Butler speech. Yes, and so I'm adding from one to another different operations, and the idea is to have. So I have Baroqueer classic, so the mix of classic and sick, and of course there is Foucault and I don't recall the other. Well, this one is modern nihilism, and so I have a sample of L'Oiseau de Feu de Stravinsky, and because I'm talking about nihilism, well, you will recognize the voice of Celan. So in this piece, I am using in a very simple way. Well, even if it's not doing edited, it's do it with a patch. It's automatized, but it's a very simple patch on which I'm just increasing the size of one window and decreasing the size of the other window in an opposite way. So it's a very simple piece on which I have this hybrid object, which is a result of both different samples, which are just connected for this idea of the name. And well, sorry, I don't know how. I don't have the. Give me a minute. So I will show you a little part of this piece. Sorry, I don't know how. Okay, it's here. Why? Sorry. It's coming.
J'étais garçon de course partout, et livreur et apprenti partout. J'étais chez La Cloche, j'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Or, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. Garçon de course partout, et livreur et apprenti partout. J'étais chez La Cloche, j'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Or, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères.
So the Stravinsky part is a little chunk, which is and the speech.
J'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Or, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. Et livreur et apprenti partout. J'étais chez La Cloche, j'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Or, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. Livreur et apprenti partout. J'étais chez La Cloche, j'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Or, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. j'étais chez Lacloche, j'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Oh, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. Partout. J'étais chez Lacloche, j'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Oh, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. J'étais chez Lacloche, j'étais chez Raymond, j'étais chez Wagner. Oh, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. J'étais chez Wagner. Oh, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. Oh, j'en ai eu 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. 12 patrons. 12 métiers, 13 misères. 12 métiers, 13 misères. Misère.
Okay, so a short piece, which on which the result is not the most important, but more is the process. And so that is a that is a very different thing. So being in Villa Medicis, I had the opportunity to do a site-specific installation on the vineyard of Villa Medicis. So the vineyard had 8 rows, and I hide or dispose in each row a series of piezo speakers. And I was aware of the environment, more or less of the acoustical environment in this place. So basically, in this piece, how the granular paradigm was applied. It was in the contents, not just because there is granular synthesis from times, but there is also this question of overlapping of cycles of different sizes, and to create an emerging object, purely electronical, which is interacting with the acoustic ambience in a way. No, it's not really interacting. No, I'm sorry. It's faking an interaction with the acoustic, environmental acoustic. And the other important point in this case is that for spatialization, which is done with ambisonics, there is some parts on which, given the velocity of the curves that I control with oscillators, with low frequency oscillators, there is a sensation of clouds moving of granular clouds moving around the installation. And here you can see how I apply some of these methods of the paradigm in a piece on which time it's not the same. It's not a piece in a concert. So the possibility of approach to the piece for the audience is not in this wave of critical distance by being in a chair and hearing, but they can, of course, change the perception of sound and moving, and the sound is a 20 minutes loop, but it was ongoing So there is a time regime which is very diverse than instrumental and mixed music, but the paradigm is still operating beneath. So I will just show, I mean, there is just a video. I cannot show, of course, that you cannot hear the spatialization, but more see the space. There was workers this time who approached me, and here was very touching. As you can see, it was in October, so the vineyard was very. In the sounds there is granular synthesis actually. Also, well, but there is other kind of synthesis. There is sampling synthesis also. Voices and etc. Okay. Okay. Let's. Sorry. Let's. Well, I have. I mean, yesterday we have a concert, Mauro, that you couldn't hear, but. In this concert, there was already pieces on which there was audiovisual pieces that I made, on which there was this conception of overlapping two cycles between sound and image, two different sized cycles, but in every cycle, the operations that I'm applying to the material is different, and the way that I'm reading and the starting point of the reading, etc. But there is the same conception. And well, here is I am not strong with jitters. This is a patch that a friend which is present in this room helped me to do. Thank you. But the idea in this patch is, I mean, it's not a piece. No, it was a model for experimenting stuff. But you can see here you have different length loops for each row of the reconstructed image, which is, I took a Mickey Mouse example here. So the image is, in this time, is reconstituted just in 3 rows, which are looping at different speeds. Here I can also choose the direction, if it's going just forward and backward, or just forward and backward. But the idea, well, of course, there is the playing with color and colorimetry. There is a lot of things that are more important. The idea was to divide the screen in a lot of rows and to reconstitute an image by rows which are reading chunks of this. In this case, this is an example with the Mickey Mouse film. But this it was also intended for image in this case, and I have the procedure which is the same. Okay. Okay, so Mauro, so we are arriving to the last part of the. So I will do a quick final step on which I will just evoke the research work that I am doing right now. They are very, very different. This idea from bottom to top strategy allows me to start with particular and very focused topics and problematics. And the idea is, to the end of this doctoral program, is maybe arrive to a kind of epistemic level on which maybe I will make emerge a wider connection which resumes the topics and the problematics. One of them is it's a video article, and I choose to. I mean, the thing was not to address the pandemics, but pandemics give me a particular context because I was in a long-term residence. I was in Villa Medicis with artists from different disciplines. And because of this pandemic, we had windows on which we could have concerts at the beginning and at the end, but in the middle we could do anything, and there was anything to do also in terms of cultural programming. And so we create with the other residents a multimedia online review. But also in the beginning and the end, I have also more installation and expositions and activities that normally I don't have so often access. But because of this kind of craziness of the pandemics that it will change the things, I could really feel with my body how I'm passing from one organizational time regime to another, or maybe both at the same time. And so the idea is, of course, related with this idea of address intermediality on a extended composable space. And so the idea is just to observe this overlap or interaction or feedback of these different art practice regimes that are responding to different organization of work time, and just to tell how it affects my my own body, so the somatics of this. And there is other which is really far away, but it's always contained in this. It's a project which is which was delayed for the COVID also, because I couldn't meet as we want with the mathematician on the time to meet. So this project is about create a compositional tool for a composition for piano, electronics, and video. And the idea is to apply Markov chains for different part of the work. So for the instrumental part, for the audio signal treatment maybe, and also for the image. I don't know if we will arrive to that. The project is for starters to document how we are shaping this tool and its interface. And after that, to produce also a paper about the whole process, how we feedback and how we shape and how he applies the Markov, and how I will ask things regarding to my necessities as a composer. There is also, of course, other projects that I will not evoke because I'm not working on it right now. So, but that is this both project that I'm doing.
Great. Thank you for the overview. That's really fantastic. I think we go for 2 hours. Thank you for the overview. That's fantastic. We're going to end at 12. So what I'm wondering right now is, Mauro, do you have any thoughts regarding the trajectory, as you know, of Fernando's work over the next period of time leading to the end of his thesis? Do you have any thoughts on his work and how it may progress? Any advice that you might have for Fernando? Yeah, and maybe we take 15 minutes or so. I'm not sure, 15, 20 minutes. Perhaps there are also questions from the audience here, but I think we're really interested if you have advices for Fernando.
Yeah, sure. I'll be really short, actually. I think, Fernando, you have to really think about this idea of bottom to top approach, because it's not really 100% clear, actually, to me what.
You mean in terms of composition or research?
Both, actually, because I don't think you're really you are really actually reasoning like bottom to top. I think you are doing something different, which I think is great, but it's not exactly what you are describing. And if I may say, for example, the last research project, like using Markov chains, for example, I think it would be a really interesting option actually to explore, because from what I saw, I mean, you have different approaches actually to granular synthesis. Like, for example, you have the Xenakis one, which is, I mean, it's all like his first Xenakis period. So basically it's a top to bottom approach, because it's the quintessence of stochastic. It's really top to bottom, because basically you're describing rules, and there's no way like a movement of one pizzicato or one sine wave is influencing whatsoever. So it's really top to bottom. And then you have this like a self-organizing things of Agostino Di Scipio, for example.
Yes.
So, for example, using feedback systems, or you can have something similar. I was thinking about that also, using cellular automata, for example. When you really have local rules that create like a very complex behavior, which is really like an emergence of a very local thing, a very little tiny local thing. And then you have your approach, which is I don't know really where it is, but I think I mean, I repeat myself because I already said that in the beginning. I think the most important thing for you is really the buffer, actually. It's really the starting point of everything. And if you are like starting to use Markov chains, basically what you're doing, what you can do is that you are actually taking rules that are already inside the buffer, because I mean, you are like when you calculate a Markov matrix, you're calculating a matrix of probabilities.
Of probabilities,
and then everything is like issued in a way from the buffer, and then you can start to manipulate the probabilities and so I think I think it would be a fruitful direction.
Project, So
I'm done.
Cool. No. So I want just to clarify. I didn't say that I have one particular way to approach composition, which is bottom to top. There is part to approach part of the process of the composition on which, in the way that I'm manipulating some sounds, are more bottom to top. But of course, it is a local, it's a localized aspect of a process. Then I'm not dogmatic, so it's not that I'm just thinking about. So, of course, but you are you are right. Of course that I'm seeing potential contradictions in some aspects. I hope that they will be fruitful. But the idea of this research is to make explicit the implicit. So if there is also even contradiction, maybe that could help to composition, but not to correct that because it's a kind of axiomatic truth, but because maybe it triggers me more ideas.
It was just a remark. I mean, there's no right and wrong because
of course, of course.
I mean, you're writing music, so it's
of course, no, but it's you see it well. There is this ambiguity between levels of approaching, and of course, there is also top to bottom things about already. A stochastical repartition is as you say, as a top to bottom. But maybe this conception that you see very well of that the buffer is the central aspect of the work. Within the buffer on which I'm starting with 10 seconds stuff, which takes me time to think because I must to already try to project on time or to have a vision of the buffer, and that the buffer has a potential of projection, okay? But I am starting for I don't start for a whole form on which I'm then filling up. I have possible path and emerging operations also. But of course, some pieces are very top to bottom in the way that they are automatized, as this little piece that I show.
Yeah.
And you are right that it could be interesting, and also you are right to evoke automatas, because I was in this piece that you mentioned, dynamogram, on which the reference is parts of the adagietto of Seventh Symphony, with the help of Daniel Sea, which worked with me at Grame, which commissioned the piece. He helped me to go through a Markov system, but at the beginning I was thinking also in the possibility of automata, of cellular automata. But in this piece, the part of Markov chains based, so the sounds that we build, that we modeling with Daniel, just experiment, and once that I had the idea more clear and the parameters that I started to compose, that was a part of the resultant buffer. But my idea was not more than to have different paths. My idea was at the end was more important how we conditioned the result that, well, of course Markov, because regarding the order of the Markov chain, and we use AC Toolbox, this Polberg program, on which you can have a degree of approaching the original source. So my idea was being around this source, but at the end it was more important how to reproduce that, because we have conditioned as one of the voices that reconstituted this from Beethoven sounds that we are was I don't know, compressing an octave with quarter tones, other just with two kind of rhythms which were inspired on Greek foot, so long or short, and other was we could distributed the statistically the appearance of this Markov generated stuff in a way on which my imagination was I want to have a complex object which has several dimensions of reconstitutions, on which there is the reference part that was generated with Markov for the instrumentation, and another part which is noisy, but it's also the buffer and is relating with some similar and recurrent pitches or other ways of relation. But my first vision was I want to have kind of tonal clouds of little sounds, very fast, but not tonal because they were functional, tonal because of the color. And so at the end we start with Markov, but the way that I use it, I conditioned the algorithm, it was more related to this paradigm. But in this case was top to bottom, of course. But at the same time, the other part of this buffer was the kind of bottom to top, because I start with a little buffer and I was developing in parallel. So, well, I'm happy that you evoke cellular automata, because that's one. It was one of the methods that I thought in order to generate notes, beats and rhythms to be played, starting from an object on which the cultural weight is, because I mean it's allegretto symphony, normal. A musician knows that. So my idea is how it will affect if they will hear how fast the reference to that. And yes, I mean aesthetically, if I can pronounce this word, aesthetically the whole idea is to reconstitute an object which is cut up of its original context and to create a new one which even the rules that serve me to do it or maybe intuitively, I'm trying to infer it from the object.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So thanks.
Yeah, do you know actually Bernard Lang is using a cellular automata?
I didn't know. Well,
yeah.
He's influencing me more. So.
Yeah, he is actually. I mean, there's very few. There are not so many articles about that, and everything is in German. So, but yes,
there is something in English. Honestly, I already told you that. The idea of having also cellular automata, I didn't found very interesting arts using that in sound-based composition, of course, sound-based artwork, more exercise or playings. But there was one piece that really triggered me, really influenced me. Was your piece on with cellular automata, the piece that you use. O Sole Mio, no? If I recall.
Yeah, exactly. O Sole Mio.
That's the starting point. So when I hear this piece, of course, you have your way on your approach, but I feel that there was a similarity in the difference, of course, but of this idea of to start up with this and then giving birth to that.
Because I'm actually using O Sole Mio as a sort of buffer. And then the cellular automata is like reading the buffer, because I mean most of the time like the cellular proliferation is by proximity. It's like basically it's like reading
when you have the graphics on this early life play, you can see how they are multiplying and always by proximity of
exactly. So basically you reconstruct the buffer because
it's kind of granular. But did you in the writing, it was by ear, or I mean the thing that you start with pizzicato and then all that
it's very strict actually. It's it's very algorithmic.
So even the playing was defined by
kind of. Well, of course great. with some minor adjustment because of playability, but really not that much.
Okay, super. It was very helpful. Thanks for your advices and your
thank
insights.
You. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mauro. Are there any other questions or comments from people in attendance? Kent, did you?
Hi, Kent.
Hi, Mauro. Hi, Mauro.
It's a little word.
Yeah, hey, hi. Nice to see you.
Hi there. I was expecting you to be here. So, good to see you. And thanks for the presentation and your discussion with Fernando. I think I'm now also thinking about like also the research here, because I mean you have, as you say, worked a lot with this granular technique, and that I find very fascinating. It's very interesting, and also what comes out. So but and you are also, as you have been shown, like also working, also taking that to other media, like like the video particular and into so and also after the concert last night. So I think what is and a lot of great works, and it was really interesting with the feedback piece that you showed yesterday. Of course, now with the research project, it's really like it would be interesting. I mean, you're suggesting some things here, but even more like where you will actually dig in. I'm thinking of, I mean, of these granular things that you, I mean, you actually have, as you have presented, I mean, actually how you work now.
Yeah.
But if we just look into that, where can you continue to research that? I mean, to the pieces. I mean, of course, there is, you have a little bit of suggestion, but even more like specific field, where you actually have questions how to develop. I mean, on what you already know. I mean, possible research questions
outcomes,
now, or where you can actually continue to investigate. What you already have, so to speak.
Yes.
I mean, you have some small details, but I think I'm also thinking larger now, because we've been talking quite a lot about the relation to the buffer and the object and so on. But even like artistic research projects now that can extend what you, so to say, already know.
Yeah, but thanks you for. I think that maybe I could draw more in a general way this question of these compositional strategies that are inspired. The idea was not that this particular topic becomes the subject, but to approach with this topic a more general subject of the feedbacking and interacting and overlapping of practice, and how the sound-based techniques are applied in others, but also then to observe how they influence me. So the idea in a bottom-to-top strategy of research is that I know that I have a kind of theoretical frame from a starting point, but the thing is really to observe on the practical level and then try to go to a more epistemic level, if that. So granular paradigm to me was the most logical way to start, of course. But then in my research project, they will be more diverse, because as you hear, I had done a piece which is based, is instrumental feedback in a way. But as you saw, there is also the voices with the quotation of Bruce Nauman text on Good Boy.
Yes. There are certainly many parts in the
so
works as such. And I'm just thinking also here that, because now when we, of course, doing the research, it's also a way of also bringing forth, I mean, the techniques and methods and things that you're actually working with. So also now to find, I mean, you've been presenting, and it's, I mean, it's quite clear to me. I'm not always sure. I mean, if we also think of sharing these things with other composers and musicians and researchers and other, also how to actually share your work, and maybe it actually is a good. I mean, you're talking about the video article, but that's a little bit different. But also how to actually also present, like maybe on like research catalog on web-based, but really to with the example, really, so we can really follow also the steps. And I think by doing that also, that can also make a way also to clarify also for you further steps in the research because as you say, there are also many things that you are diving into that. There are text, I mean, the text-based, the references you're using in different way, like the text, the video, you're picking up, I mean, the found objects at one part. And of course, then we have the technique on the granular, or like the Markov chain. So maybe it could also be an idea to like also look into the different parts in each, but because you, as you said, you're often talking about the everything at the same time. So I think, and that is how we work as composers. But I think for the project, to be able to dive in also to really dive into specific parts and write about them because they are interesting. I think by doing that, you will also see more.
I hope.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. But I think that can be a good idea. Actually, now I'm thinking of it, but because they are complex. Each project, it can be an idea just to continue to unpack them. Also, I mean, why are you using certain references? Like you had a lot of great examples yesterday. So maybe also looking into that, I'm thinking now to unpack really the different parts of your work.
Well, the bottom to top is the idea to focus on concrete observations on the work, and to have this first continent, which is very wide. I am aware of that. You know, this extended composable space is a very wide. For that, there is a starting point more than a theoretical frame in a way.
Yeah.
But the idea is, I will, of course, write several papers, but I will not address a whole of my practice because it's very diverse.
No, you shouldn't do that, of course. But I really think that also by exploring the composable spaces, also to like look from like different
sides,
with different lenses, you must say, in how that. So you kind of look into different parts of your practice now. And then you put everything together again in the end. That is, I mean, it has been great, this presentation on the concert yesterday, because it really, I mean, of course I know your work since before, but it's really something to now finally actually hear a full concert, and thanks to the ensemble. It was really great yesterday. So you give, I mean, and we've been talking and you present, but it also gives a lot now when like hearing a lot of pieces at the same time.
Yeah.
Hear you talk about it, it's giving me also. So I'm really thinking of this to I mean, as advice in that way to also look at just certain parts. I think of the project to be able actually to dive down, because
of course,
because if you try to look at everything at the same time,
it
almost becomes a bit too wide all the time, and that should be the art project later on when everything is put together.
Of course, you are seeing very clear. It's for that it was I was very fast conscious that I had not to go from an epistemic level and go down. That I had to start with simple observations, and the first year was more trying to experiment and found different methodologies which could be adequate to each of them. It's for that I'm also starting with two very different projects, because I will experiment very different methodological approach, because in this video article it was a bit more auto-ethnographic kind of methodology. And in the project with Thomas Persson, I forget to, sorry, it's also with Pavlos Antoniadis, the piano player. We are three on the project. In the other experiment, modeling more kind of research methodology. So I am at the same time learning about methodologies and trying to see, as you see, to identify and to. I hope that the next year I will arrive to a sort of a map of that helps me to
And along with what Ken said, you could also test or examine your different methods, the windowing, the buffering, the different overlapping time scales. You can test them in terms of perception, in terms of acoustics. So you can actually make measures that are examining your intuition, right? The robustness of the different configurations that you're putting together. So that's also something that's possible for the future, and we can talk about that as well. But
good.
Yeah.
Well,
any other questions or comments?
Thank you. If it's maybe just 5 minutes. It will be a bit short to talk about it. But you mentioned the gestalt of even the cell, right? Even the very short motive. How do you conceive it in general? I would say that it would represent the poetics of the work finally, right? Or the artistical aspect of what this micro. How do you conceive the gestalt from within, right? From the buffer, from the game.
Well, I use the word gestalt because sometimes in order to clarify and protect on time, I'm thinking very simple. So if it's a figure is going up or down, or just staying, and which kind of color, and if it's going to from noise to, so it's for that I know that the word has resonance that are wider, but I use also figures. I didn't.
But also in the sense that making reference to the global piece, because you mentioned that you were conceiving those like 10 seconds in term to become 10 minutes, right? And when you conceive those 10 seconds, like with the vision of the larger scale, once you are conceiving the shorter one, right?
Yes, so
there is a sort of gestalt notion in the little cell in order to build the larger.
Yes,
right.
It's not defined the exact amount of time on which I will develop, but yes, there is this kind of project. And I didn't thought that in a theoretical way. I was just creating, experimenting, and seeing and hearing, and reshaping. So, and when I am thinking about that, in the reality, you have so many inputs in your head that it depends on which vision, the point of view of that you are approaching a particular topic or problem. But yes, the idea is to condense already in the buffer his potential projection. So there is also this relation between object and operation, which is, as Mauro say, very influenced by Johnny, who was very influenced by object-oriented programming.
Yeah. So you have conceiving the object aesthetically.
Yes. It's tough to say this word here in this ambience, but yes, because I'm thinking about the reference, the noise, and I know that is how you deploy in time a sound object who has a lot of cultural reference. Well, there is no object without, but there is more heavy ones. And so the resultant perception, and of course it depends on the background of every listener, but I know that I'm using at the same time more kind of neutral, and I repeat, there is no neutral, there is no cultural reference object, because if we are doing kind of noise, we am doing a reference to the historical advancement on writing. So, but yes, it's aesthetic. Yeah, is that? Yeah. Thanks.
Are there any questions from the observers, the viewers on Zoom? If there are any questions, you could type them into the chat window.
Well, if there are.
Quickly.
If there, I don't know if
are there any other comments in the meantime?
I think the most interesting part for me personally on your research is to the application of this granular paradigm to hybrid and other media stuff. And I guess this is going to be very encouraging and very fascinating, because by doing that you will find a lot of things that you will feed back again into your compositional like writing music. So I guess for me, developing that part could be very inspiring. How to apply this, not only perhaps the granular paradigm, but other paradigms of that are
Sound-based.
stolen or borrowed from electronic music composition
course.
into the works
Into other medias, yeah.
with other media such as, well, architecture, installation,
Of course.
video, and even the text
Yeah,
literature
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it's a good observation, and it's a little bit the idea. It may be that during the research, one of the things that I thought that was a local and focused maybe became larger and effective. I don't know. I'm trying to leave me some freedom because the interesting part of this research department is that allows you to already shape your research not in a way of doing just a big thesis, which is also interesting, but different papers. But maybe after the first or second paper that I finished, I found that there is a more strong thing that drives me, and I will follow it. But I think you see right. The main question is this feedback that occurs when you are applying, because I am a musician. So, of course, I am not leaving the musician when then I approach in other type of artistic production. But I know that by doing that, I am also modifying myself and my perception of my own activity. So we have question maybe or there?
Yeah, someone raised their hand, but I can't see.
Yes, the first one.
There.
Okay.
I have to.
I'm kind of blind for the light.
Maybe I can.
Yeah, maybe we can.
Yeah, it says a lot of talk on the left.
Yes. It's Jonah. Okay.
On the left.
On the left.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Oh, it should work.
Did we have sound there?
Yeah, we have some.
Okay.
Hi. Well, if not, you can maybe write it on the chat.
The microphone is cut.
Yeah.
Maybe click on the microphone.
Yeah, maybe click on, or maybe Jonah click on the microphone.
Does she have to turn on?
She has to turn on.
Please turn on your microphone.
Turn on your microphone so you can speak and ask, please.
Dice que es el que está abajo a la izquierda, el icono.
Yeah, it is the icon who is to your left, down into your left.
He has to do it, right?
Yeah,
She?
Yes,
She.
I don't know, but maybe it's not Mayre, maybe it's not. She's not wanting to. She's just commenting. No. Okay. No, maybe there is no questions.
Okay.
Or if not, you can write it down on the chat if it's the case, or if not, we can just finish here. She can write it, yeah, of course. She left. Okay. We scared her.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mauro,
Yeah,
for
thanks a lot.
your participation. And Fernando, thanks for
Thanks to
your
you.
presentation. And it was a great presentation. I enjoyed this very much. I hope you all did as well. And thank you for coming. Great. Have a good day.